Hello and welcome to Insights with me, Lynne O'Donnell. I'm presenting an interview I did in 2021 before the fall of the Republic government of Afghanistan, when it was already clear that its collapse was not far off. I visited the Afghanistan Centre for Memory and Dialogue, a small museum established in an ordinary house in Kabul's Kartachar district to preserve the memories of people killed in Afghanistan's many wars and conflicts. It was a poignant collection of personal items like letters, shoes, articles of clothing, jewellery and photographs that bore heartbreaking testimony to the brutality that swept across Afghanistan for decades. It's no longer open, of course, shut down by the Taliban pretty soon after they retook control of the country, not long after my visit. It was set up, curated and run by Jawad Zawulistani, who told me about the ethos of the centre and its importance to all of Afghanistan's people, regardless of ethnicity, religion or background. We talked while we sat at a small wooden table, kind of like a school desk, on which there were rusted steel handcuffs and chains that had been used during torture. And you'll hear the searing music that provided a haunting backdrop for the many visitors, including groups of school children who came to learn an important part of their own history. Have a listen. Jawad, welcome. Can you please introduce yourself maybe and tell us a little bit about you and what you've built here?
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. My name is Jawad Zawulistani and I work as Managing Director of Afghanistan Human Rights and Democracy Organization. And here we are sitting at Afghanistan Centre for Memory and Dialogue, which documents and preserves memories of victims of war from 4 decades of conflict in Afghanistan, starting from 1978 when the communist coup happened and until today, which unfortunately the conflict continues.
So what is it that you hope to achieve here? What have you done?
So unfortunately, Afghanistan has seen this protracted conflict for decades, and it has taken millions of lives of civilians. And unfortunately, it has become a normal thing to see civilians die every day, and no one pay attention to the stories behind each life, and no one is thinking about the root causes of the violence and why this violence keep perpetuating itself. And every time when we try to end it, we actually enter into a new cycle of conflict, and in a lot of cases into a more violent cycle. So the center tries to bring the very human stories of victims, their families and survivors into the public, and helps the victims and their survivors to be able to tell their stories of loss and suffering with the public, and be able to take it out from the confined space of their homes. And in most cases, and in a lot of cases, these stories are from mothers who have lost their children, or from a wife who has lost her husband and been totally marginalized from the society, and are being called like a widow. And unfortunately, they are treated not only listened to, but even they are not treated as like other women's, let alone as equals to men in this very male-dominated patriarchal society. But also we believe that it is very important to hear victims of war, to hear their stories, and also it is very important to break the cycle of violence by bringing into attention these stories and listening to these people, and also addressing this very entrenched culture of impunity in this country. So we hope by this documentation, by preservation of the memories and losses of the civilian victims, we can also raise awareness about the unimaginable losses that the country has endured for several years, and through that we are also trying to empower victims of war to speak for themselves and break this very entrenched culture of impunity and seek justice. And we hope that the country one day see justice and accountability.
So you say that people have kept these memories of their victimisation and the victimisation of their loved ones to themselves until you came along and gave them an outlet for it. Afghanistan, the culture here has never struck me as one of silence when it comes to grief. Is it a politicisation of victimhood?
I think that happened in the country so much, and even today it is victims' issues, victims' stories, and victims' sufferings are being too much politicized, which in most cases harms victims themselves and undermine their demand for justice and accountability in Afghanistan. And I think in a lot of cases that was the case. The victims never felt that they were heard, never felt that their demands, someone cared about their stories, their demands, and no one know that how they suffered and how with what kind of resilience and hope they continue to live. And then what are their demands, let's say, for justice and accountability? So that was, and they did not have an opportunity, and in most cases, because they never found that opportunity, because always the perpetrators were in power, and they were able to silence victims by threats, by intimidation, or even by re-victimizing, removing the survivors who were speaking up, who were seeking justice. When we say yes, people speak up about their pain in their community. We have a strong sense of community. We grieve together. There are many events where people can empathize, can show their sympathy to the families who have suffered. But when it comes to their demand for justice and accountability, and then people in power and those and perpetrators see that as a threat to their position and to their power, then in most cases in the past they have resorted to violence, threat and intimidation to silence them. And of course, politicization has always been a problem in Afghanistan, and that happened in post-2001 Afghanistan, where people's hopes for justice and accountability and living a peaceful life was very high in the early days. But due to this very much politicization of the transitional justice issues and victims' demands, we saw the passing of an amnesty bill in 2007, which perpetrators not only forgave themselves for their past crimes, but also forgave themselves for potential future crimes. And that was mainly caused by too much politicization of transitional justice and victims' demands. The bureaucratic elite who came from the West, they tried to use transitional justice and victims' demands as a political tool to sideline their Mujahideen rivals. And then when Mujahideen were able to dominate the Afghan parliament, then they used their power and passed the law to basically kill any transitional justice efforts in Afghanistan and victims' demands. And that still remains the biggest obstacle for victims in accessing justice and seeing accountability in Afghanistan. And unfortunately, we fear that with the current situation and the current situation of the Afghan peace process, we may face greater challenges in ensuring victims' representation in the peace process and victims' demands in the final outcome, which would be the peace agreement.
Well, let's get to that a little bit later. When you were building your what would we call it, a memorial museum, your centre here, how did you find the people that you wanted to help and memorialise?
This work is the result of several years of work, and we started this initiative in 2011. The initiative was called the Memory Box Initiative, and that came, the idea came from victims, survivors themselves. We were working through different workshops, through different theatrical activities with victims of war, mostly female survivors of victims of war. And the idea was to help them to share their stories, but also to help them heal themselves through sharing their stories and narratives, through narrative therapy. And then just connect with each other, victims themselves. And during those workshops, one of the workshop participants, women who had lost her husband during the Taliban in 1990s, told that we should turn this energy and tears into a powerful tool that can change something. That is a useful tool for advocacy, for raising awareness, and also for mobilizing other victims around their shared pain and common interests of victims.
So the memory box idea.
The memory box idea came out of that. And it was then that we started developing a methodology which worked with victims, participants for 1 week or so, sometimes longer than 1 week, depending on the participants and the number of participants. Sometimes like for 4 days or 5 days. And through those workshops, we tried to create a safe space where victims could work together, could sympathize, could build trust, and then share their stories. And toward the end of the session, they were asked to build a memory box in memory of their loved one or loved ones. So one memory box belongs to a family who have lost one or several family members during the past several conflict, and they were designing the memory box themselves through different artistic and theatrical activities and exercises. And at the end of it, they would bring anything left behind from a lost dear one and put it in the memory box that they had constructed and designed in memory of their loved ones.
So what sort of things are we talking about?
And it includes everything from toothpaste to a letter smuggled out of Pulitzer prison, the central prison of Afghanistan, located in the capital, to pictures of the victim, which is very dear to their families, their shoes, their clothes, and in some cases they have brought even food items. For example, you can here you can see a box where the family members have brought the plate and the rice that the victim liked, because the victim had liked to have his rice meal in that plate. And whenever now they are sitting together and they have a dish of rice, they are reminded of their loved one who has been taken from them, and it's very dear to them. So they have brought some rice inside the plate that the victim used to have it in.
Well, we're sitting in the hall of your memorial museum now. Do you get many visitors here?
Before COVID and before the situation, the security situation got this worse, we had many visitors here, and visitors include anyone from foreign embassies to government officials to civil society activists to university and high school students, and most importantly, victims' families and victim survivors themselves. For victims, I think it was very significant that they had a space dedicated for the civilian victims of war here. They would come here and only sit beside the memory box of his or her lost dear one, and sometimes just look at it for like 15, 13 or half an hour, sometimes cry there for half an hour or 1 hour and leave. And that was a healing experience for themselves. And besides that, I think some years ago, the Afghan government decided not to include the past, the history of past 4 decades of conflict in school and university curriculum. So the new generation of Afghanistan who are suffering from the consequences of the several decades of conflict are denied the right to know about the 4 decades of conflict. So we were organizing and still, if we can, we were organizing guided tours for university students and high school students to come here, visit the center, and then know about the 4 decades of conflict themselves, read victims' stories, see the other information about the past 4 decades of conflict, which is gathered and provided here. Also read survivors' experiences of the conflict, and see the objects and personal items of victims left here. And beside that, we do victims' public hearing, where victims, survivors, and family members come here and share their stories of loss, suffering, and resilience with the public. And that's the only opportunity where they can share their stories with the public, because most often they cannot do that, and they do not tell those stories with their family members or women or with their children, because they think it may make them too much upset or traumatized. But they themselves are suffering because of that heavy trauma inside. Once they come here, they are able to share that, and it heals them, it relieves them from the heaviness of the pain. But also, it is very important for us that the public have an opportunity to acknowledge to victims suffering and pain, and be able to empathize with them. So together we can all help collective healing of all of us, including people who have not been directly affected by conflict, or who have not yet lost a family member to conflict.
But when you're talking about more than 40 years of war, starting in 78, I guess you go back to with the Soviet invasion, and then the civil war, followed by the Mujahideen conflict and the Taliban, and now we're coming to the end of 20 years of war that began in 2001. There can't be very many people in Afghanistan who are not impacted by the violence. So how do you decide who is a victim and who is not? And is the use of the word victim itself prejudicial, stigmatized? How do you decide who is and who isn't impacted by generations of conflict and war?
If we define victim, so if we see it from a very general perspective, of course the number is millions, and it could cover more than 60% of the Afghan population. But here we work with victims, with people who themselves have been affected physically by the conflict, or who have lost a family member during the conflict. So we are working with only with civilian victims of war based on the international humanitarian law definition of a civilian who have not actively and directly taken part in combat in war. But there have been civilians who have been directly impacted by the conflict. They have lost a limb, or they have been tortured during the past 4 decades of conflict, or they have lost a family member to the conflict.
But you're talking about potentially hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people. I mean, the UNAMA figures, the United Nations figures for, well, since they started collating them after the 2001 war began, more than 47,000, let's say 50,000 people. And each one of those people comes from a potentially large family. So it's enormous. Can you say that no Afghans have been impacted by the last 40 odd years of war?
I can say that maybe everyone have been impacted by the conflict indirectly or directly. But here, of course, the number is very huge, and the sad thing is that we know that everyone has been impacted, but we don't know the exact figure. We only make guesses about the number of people who have been injured or killed during the more than 4 decades of conflict in Afghanistan. The only reliable figure about the civilian casualty we have is from the UNAMA, which starts from 2009. So before that, we unfortunately do not have any figure of the civilian casualty in Afghanistan. Even we do not have reliable figures from, let's say, 2006, 2005, or 2007. UNAMA started documenting civilian casualty only after 2009, and that's a very huge number. We know that the number of victims in Afghanistan ranges millions of people, but we don't know how many. That's one of the difficulty we are facing. But here we know that the number is huge. We know that millions of people, millions of civilians have been affected by the violence and conflict. Here, however, the idea is that we create a dialogue on the civilian loss, on the huge human cost of the violence and conflict in Afghanistan, by bringing in the very personal stories of victims and survivors and their experiences of the loss, and how a big toll it lives on the family members, on the community, and on the broader Afghan society.
Yeah, on the psyche of the country.
Exactly, on the psyche of the country.
Yeah. It's very moving, and there's a lot in here that is really quite difficult to look at and read, and in particular, for me, the pyramid that you have of things that were collected from the victims of the attack on Hazara marches, I think in 2016, am I correct?
Yes, that happened in July 2016, and that was one of the biggest protest rallies of the Hazara community against the injustice that the community believed the Afghan government was doing to them, by depriving them from their basic right to development and rerouting a major power line from the Hazara areas to other areas, which the community saw that as a blatant act of discrimination in continuation of several decades of discrimination against the community.
Well, it's not just decades, is it? It's quite a long time. But before we get into that, maybe you could explain the different ethnic groups. I know one of the things that you want to do here is you don't want to make any one group more victimised than any other, but the fact is that Afghanistan is a collection of ethnicities and religious groups, and each one of them likes to stand alone in some way. What's the ethos when it comes to that, the tribalisation, the ethnicization, and the subdivision into different religious sects, if you like, of Islam? How does that impact what you do?
So here, if we are mainly focusing on victims without any I would say discrimination or segregation of any ethnic or religious group. For us, specifically, if I speak about the work we do here with victims, it's very easy, because we start very slowly. We use different statistical and theatrical exercises, and this and through that, trust is built very slowly, and divisions are removed slowly. And at the end, they see themselves as the victims of several decades of conflict in Afghanistan, that they should work together in order to reach justice.
So no,
but generally,
not having one, sorry, not for interrupting, but not having one ethnic group blaming another ethnic group for its victimization.
In some cases, in some cases during the workshop, that was the case. That was why we developed different theatrical methodologies and exercises to facilitate that dialogue. They were blaming, for example, one ethnic group would blame the other ethnic group as the cause of their victimization, as the cause of their oppression. But through that very careful work, we were able to put aside those differences and bring them together around one issue, which is that all of them have suffered so much, and if they want to put an end to that suffering and this cycle of violence and this very strong culture of impunity, they need to work together. But speaking historically about the Afghanistan experience, of course, it is a very divided society, and unfortunately, this division was the seed of this division was sown when the modern Afghanistan emerged, and it emerged out of a very deadly, or I would say genocidal suppression of different ethnic groups who opposed the role of the role of the then Afghan monarchy. And some of the communities paid very huge prices back then lost a huge percentage of their population and as well as their land in different parts of Afghanistan, today Afghanistan. And unfortunately, that systematic discrimination continued and still continues, and it majorly impacts the Hazara ethnic group. And that's why when you talk to Hazaras about the history of Afghanistan, they cannot recall a day when they were treated as equal citizens. They cannot call a day when they had a happy day in the country and they had a share and a say in the fate of the country. It's always been a perpetual story of loss, suffering, and subjugation, and of course expulsion and land grabbing.
And that goes back a century, as you say, to the early part of the 20th century, specifically. What was it that prompted that?
I think at the early day it was so I think it also had a very strong relation with the imperial policy of the British India to create a buffer state, which later took the name of Afghanistan, in order to prevent a collision between the two imperial powers,
Britain and Russia at the time.
Britain and Russia at the time. So through that, they empowered Amir Abdurrahman Khan to rule the country as a iron Amir, with very heavy-handed rule over the country's population. I think it started from that, but through years, but slowly it took the shape of a genocidal campaign against the Hazara and the Hazara community of Afghanistan, who put the strongest opposition against the role of Amir, because they did not want to give in their sovereignty to the Amir of Kabul. And then, in order to subjugate that, the Emir started a very organized and mobilized genocidal campaign against them.
And it was genocidal, wasn't it? Sorry, but just to explain, at the time the Hazara community were very wealthy. They probably constituted the biggest ethnic group in the area that we now call Afghanistan. They had very sophisticated and educated culture. And they were a threat, I guess, to the position of the Khan.
They were a threat, a position to, of course they were a threat to the power in Kabul, but I think they were not that sophisticated, and their geography had limited their access to other parts of the world, and I think that was why they were cut off from the regional interaction, and I would say even unaware of the power dynamics in the region and how power dynamics in the region were shifting. And when the fight started against them, every area, every valley fought against the very organized and supported by the imperial power army of the Emir Abdurrahman Khan, separately and individually, and that was I think the reason for their very deadly and catastrophic defeat in Uruzgan, and then Zabul, and different parts of southern and southwestern and central Afghanistan back then. But the intention from the Kabul government was to subjugate them, to evacuate them from the major areas, and for that to happen, the Kabul power, the Kabul government mobilized every force. They Amir Abdul Rahman Khan gathered Sunni religious scholars, ulamas from across the country, and asked them to issue a fatwa a fatwa of jihad against the Hazaras and Shias, because they were infidels, and that was why if you are killing them, if you are looting them, and if you are selling them into slavery, it will not only be punished, but it will be rewarded not only in this world but also in the other world. And I think that was why that when different in addition to the Kabul government forces, different tribal armies mobilized along and beside the Kabul government forces to attack the Hazaras, to take them into slavery, and to take their lands and totally annihilate them. Based on the calculations which is done based on the land and areas the Hazaras lost, they killed more than 65% of the population. And the idea, I think the idea it could amount to a genocidal campaign that started then, which remains unfortunately unrecognized until today. And that's why when today the community is facing such a campaign, such a widespread and systematic campaign against them, only because of their ethnic and religious identity, they recall that experience and see these things, these events happen in continuation of that early genocide against the community, which remains unrecognized.
Well, it really pushed the Hazara community to the very bottom of the socio-economic ladder in Afghanistan. Menial work you see being done in all over the country is done by Hazara people. So if I look at the United Nations definition of a genocide, and then look at the past century of history of the way the Hazara people have been treated, pretty much ticks all the boxes for the definition of a genocide. And what we've seen going on in the last, just even in the last year, if you look back at the attacks in Afghanistan against Hazara people, it's very difficult to see it in any other way. I mean, maternity hospitals where women in labour and newborn babies in their cribs are murdered, or the attack most recently on the school in Dashtibachi where young women of childbearing age were killed in enormous numbers. It's difficult to see that is not part of a genocidal campaign.
Yes, we see that part of a genocidal campaign, and we think that extremist groups allied with maybe so many unknown powers are hell-bent on the destroying of the community. And while the Afghan government has been unable or unwilling to do anything to protect the community, and people at the community still believe that the official policy of discrimination against the community that started from late 19th century, early 20th century continues until today, and their sufferings, their loss still remain unacknowledged and unrecognized, which all confirm that the system, the structures that carried out the first genocide are still in place, and even maybe complicit in the ongoing genocidal campaign against the community.
Well, there's no public debate, is there, about the ethnic delineation of the country? You've got the Uzbeks agitating in the north. You have the Tajiks in the Panjshir Valley rallying around a charismatic leader in Ahmad Massoud, son of the Mujahideen leader. It seems to me that we've come to a point in Afghanistan's modern history where the breakup or federalisation of the country along ethnic and ethno-religious lines is a very real possibility.
If it was a real possibility in the past, I think with the current situation, it is a real possibility, and I think that's why we really need to come together. We really need to acknowledge what has happened to its community, and we need to listen to its community, that how they want to live and how they want to shape the country. Their voices must be heard. Otherwise, with the continuation of the past oppressive policies, we are contributing to pushing Afghanistan to that direction, which is, I think, the result of the several decades of a monopolistic view toward the country and a class view toward the citizens of the country, seeing them in different classes, as one would be on the top, and then others would do certain jobs or have certain roles in the country. With that view, you cannot build a nation. You cannot build a country. That's why we think it is the time. It is the time that we all, and someone should show leadership, acknowledge the past sufferings and pain, and acknowledge the past, and chart a creative way by bringing and listening and meaningfully including everyone as equal citizens, treating them as equal human beings to build the country. Even now, I cannot talk of building the country, of rescuing. We should talk of rescuing the country.
Yeah.
I think the several, I would say, centuries of modern Afghanistan experience has shown that no one can save the country alone. So if we are to save the country, then we need to put everyone in a position that these themselves see responsible for the country and owning the country, and not being discriminated and suppressed.
Yeah. We're sitting at a small wooden table on which there's, it's a scene of horror, really, isn't it? Can you describe what it is? We're on these creaky wooden chairs, and this is an old wooden table made of 3 planks that have been put together, and on it is what looks like, how would you describe? This is a neck brace and ankle and wrist cuffs all on a chain together. What is it? What was it used for?
So basically, this is a replica of a torture desk of the Afghanistan communist regime, which used this part for the neck, this tool for the feet, for the legs, and this tool for the wrists, to tie them up. But I think it could also be a symbol of the history of Afghanistan, which is full of horror, torture, oppression, and marginalization. And I think it could also stand as a symbol for the struggle of Afghanistan people, different communities, for justice, for equality, and for trying them to break away all these shackles and chains and live as equal human beings, where they also deserve a peaceful life, as everyone does in the human community. I think today this is most important to recall not only several decades of past history, but also recall the very recent history of the Taliban rule in late 1990s, that not only indiscriminately put everyone in prison. For example, for shaving his beard, but also stoning women in the separatist stadiums. So I think this is, for me, this desk and these chains and shackles serve as a reminder of the traumatic and painful history of Afghanistan, and that's why I think whenever I come here, whenever I see this shackle and chain, I am determined to work hard and seek ways to prevent Afghanistan of repeating those dark chapters of its history.
Well, we're at a point in July 2021 where the international military is almost packed up to leave. And there's a lot of people in Afghanistan who fear that this is paving the way for a return of the Taliban and the repression that they were famous for between 1996 and 2001. What's your feeling about that? From my perspective, I'm neither pessimistic nor optimistic. I think that panic is not being managed. And the fact that Afghanistan has an extremely young population, 70% of the people in Afghanistan are under 30, and they have a lot to live for and a lot to give and gain. How do you feel about that?
I agree with you that the current panic is not being managed well, and that's due to very costly failure at the political leadership. But personally, I'm not pessimistic. I think the Taliban will not be able to rule again over the country, rule again over the empowered population of the country, empowered young women of the country, empowered young men of the country, who are the main benefactor of what comes next in the country. And I think the number of people who are determined to live a peaceful life and to end this painful chapter of their country, of the history of their country, is very very strong, and they are a great number. But of course, if the international community, led by the U.S. And the U.S.-led peace process, made very huge mistakes, and I think that's why we are here, and they are leaving as soon as they can. That means we, as the people of Afghanistan, now decide for ourselves independently. And I think, of course, it may not come easy, and it may not come for free. It may still come with some cost in our blood, maybe, which I would not like to go there, but I think it may come. But the Taliban will not be able to take over the country, and I see promising signs of different communities around the country mobilizing against the Taliban. And this time, they are not mobilizing to save the current failed and corrupt government. They are mobilizing to defend their communities. They are mobilizing to defend the rights of their daughters to attend their schools. And they are rising this time to defend themselves as equal human being. And I think for the new generation of Afghanistan, it would be a decisive decision that what will we do. And I think it would be similar to the Europeans' fight against the fascists. They did their fight against their fascists, and I think we may need to do our fight against our fascists, and will not let them to push us back into dark old days, or to in a Stone Age living condition. We will not go back to there, and they cannot push us to there. So it may come at a cost, and it may take some more years, but at the end of the day, they will be defeated. They will lose, not us.
Good. Well, Jawad Zawulistani, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. So glad to be able to have this detailed conversation about the very important issues of current and past Afghanistan.
Yeah, indeed. And best of luck to you too.
Thank you.
Thanks.
That was Jawad Zawulistani in a discussion we recorded in 2021 as he showed me around the Afghanistan Centre for Memory and Dialogue. It was a memorial to the many thousands of people who died in conflict in Afghanistan's recent history, closed down by the Taliban when they took power shortly after my visit. I hope you enjoyed it. That's all for now. I'm Lynne O'Donnell. Bye-bye.